Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 Plus 4 is finally on the way, man. But not without some issues. Specifically with the removal of Tony Hawk Pro Skater 4's career mode. Fans of Tony Hawk Pro Skater 4 are rightfully upset as the career mode was a huge change for the franchise. Changing it from the 2-minute format of old will require Tony Hawk Pro Skater 4 as we know it to be potentially gutted and in some people's eyes ruined. I love Tony Hawk Pro Skater 4. In fact, it's the first game I ever asked for Christmas. I get why people are worried, but for those that are new to the Tony Hawk franchise, I think it's important that we properly explain what has changed. Sometimes nostalgia can blind us and our wants can cloud our judgments. Tony Hawk Pro Skater 4's career mode wasn't this grand evolution to the series. It helped lay the foundation for future projects, but Tony Hawk Pro Skater 4's career mode itself is more like a prototype than anything worth fussing over. So let me give you a brief history of Tony Hawk Pro Skater's career modes to fully understand why Tony Hawk Pro Skater 4's career mode being changed isn't really worth the fuss that people are putting up about it. Before I go any further, it's important to lay out the bread and butter of Tony Hawk Pro Skater. These games live and die on their pick up and play gameplay. Easy to learn but hard to master mechanics, well-balanced level design, the challenges provided by the devs, and the rewards for completing them. As long as these major mechanics are great, Tony Hawk will be great. This key point will be a major factor in my argument, so keep this in mind. Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1 all the way up to Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3 all had the same career mode. You pick a skater and a level, you have 2 minutes to complete as many challenges as possible, and anything that you did miss on your first try, you could just retry the level and get them on the second try. This is the 2-minute format that Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3 Plus 4 will be changing for Tony Hawk Pro Skater 4's career mode. This 2-minute format was so beloved by gamers, and outside of us really just wanting the franchise to evolve, we never really had a problem with it. In fact, the 2-minute format was so popular that future releases added a classic mode that mirrors the arcadey feel of the 2-minute format games. Tony Hawk Pro Skater 4 switched it up by allowing the player to free roam in its career mode. They removed the timer and let the player skate around as much as they wanted to. Now keep this in mind, Tony Hawk always had free skate. This is a mode that lets you do the same exact thing, it's just that there are no career mode goals inside of free skate. You could just skate as much as you want and do whatever you want, it's just no goals to complete. Because Pro Skater 4 was the next generation leap for the series, Neversoft made all the levels bigger, and with the added free roam, it made Tony Hawk feel open world, sorta. Which, if you know anything about the 6th generation of game systems, you know at that time, open world games were all the rage with games like Grand Theft Auto and whatnot, so Tony Hawk going this direction was just the norm. The funny thing is about all of this is that even back then, people really didn't like this change that much. Now, people didn't hate it by any means, but it felt unnecessary to a lot of people. The reason being is that Tony Hawk Pro Skater 4 has no story mode, and this design was clunky in some areas, and ultimately it just felt like a gimmick and not one that was worth caring about much. Outside of collecting money to buy extras, there was nothing to do outside of missions in career mode but skate. Well, they did have mini games and stuff, but no one really messed around this unless you just cared about the novelty of it or wanted to be a completionist. The devs needed something to add, so I guess they figured this was something good to do, but again, this is stuff that a lot of people who played these games, even back then, messed around with once, some didn't even know it was there, and they stopped caring about it. Now again, I'm not saying that we all thought this was horrible or anything, but it did feel pointless, and here's why. Most gamers will start a level, beeline it to a mission giver, do the mission, save, then find the next mission to do. So this free roaming part of Tony Hawk Pro Skater 4 really became a glorified menu system if you think about it. If most people are just going to go after the next mission, then you might as well just give them the 2-minute format. Remember again, there's no story. There are just a bunch of challenges to complete, which is similar to what you did in the 2-minute format, but now you could just free roam. Some of these missions had funny dialogue, but when I say funny, I mean it was trying to be funny. I don't think anyone laughed at this stuff. It was just kind of stupid or goofy.
You see any? my good lord, Ranger Bob has gone and amassed an army of hypnotized tourists. Scott, this evil plotter, will surely lose this island. Knock him off that ledge!
And you said to yourself, oh, okay, that's funny, I guess. And then you didn't care about it anymore. Again, you're going to see why this stuff is really just pointless. To expect these developers to remake all these missions with the dialogue attached will require more money and time. And I just don't think gamers have changed that much from when Tony Hawk Pro Skater 4 first came out. If we skipped the dialogue back then, what would people do today? We all know the answer. So outside of nostalgia, why would you want the devs to waste time, money, and resources on something that most of us didn't even pay attention to when it was new in 2002? I didn't even mention how slow finishing these missions were. You find a goal, you beat it, watch a slow, weird clapping animation. The game asks you to save, which, if you were like me, you will most likely do because this game doesn't have autosave. Then you wait for this process to finish. Then finally, you're back in the game. Yes, I know you could fix all this with modern day hardware. It was fixed in the Tony Hawk games that came after this one, like Thug 1. But even if all this was addressed in the remake, it wouldn't change that the NPC dialogue was skipped by us back in the day. So unless they're about to make some new type of story to go with it, we would just skip it again. So even if they fix the saving part, the slow animation in and out of missions, that doesn't address the overall issue is that this feature was always half-baked even back in the day. To go even further with my point, let me remind you guys of how this free roaming gameplay had always been hit or miss for the Tony Hawk series. Underground 1 was the first game to actually bring us a story, which made free roaming and this pseudo open world design that 4 attempted gel better. You could also get off your board in this game, which was controversial at the time. A lot of people liked it and a lot of people didn't. They also added weird driving segments, which we all know was a gimmick at the time. They removed finding money in the open world, but they actually gave a reason to free skate. Rather you're on a mission or free skating around, you can level up your character by just doing different skills. So for example, if you grind for a long distance, you'll level up your grinding. The story in combination with this organic way of leveling up did make the free roaming design that Tony Hawk was going into seem better, but not as great as the 2-minute format. Thug 2 was mostly the same. It had a jackass-like story. Cars were replaced with vehicle characters that rode skateboard-like machines that you could trick on. They kept the organic leveling system, added indestructible environments, and challenges that didn't require you to speak to anyone to start. This is one of my favorites in the series, but they added so many gimmicks because they felt they needed to. Why did they feel they needed to? Because when you go into a more open world design and you don't really have much to add, you need to fill it up with something, so they filled it up with gimmicks. Because in the beginning, the open world design for Tony Hawk was a gimmick. So they had to add gimmicks on top of the gimmick to make the gimmick make some sense. In reality, Neversoft made a perfect formula with the first Tony Hawk game. But humans are never satisfied, and that's why we got so many different changes to the formula with Tony Hawk Pro Skater 4. In fact, Thug 2 brought in the classic game mode with the 2-minute format because despite everything, we all deep down in our souls knew that the 2-minute format was still the best way to play Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. But Neversoft kept trying. Tony Hawk's American Wasteland was the next game in the series, and guess what? It was more of the same. This time we were stuck in LA, and now we have an official open world. Like I mean completely connected open world, but there's a problem. See, they stitched basically pockets of levels that were about the same size as levels in the past with these loading halls because of hardware limitations. Everyone thought this was a stupid idea even back then. Now, me personally, I didn't hate it, but even I felt that the design was kind of odd. But once you've unlocked fast travel, you won't even be doing this anymore unless the game makes you. Now, this kind of sounds familiar, doesn't it? Neversoft offering something up for the player only for them to realize that the player doesn't even want to do this thing and they just kind of do what they always been doing, which is going straight for the goals. Whatever, maybe it's just me. Tony Hawk's American Wasteland didn't even add much to the open world career mode anyway. The story was great in my opinion, and Mindy was every teenage boy's crush back in the day, but you could tell that they were running out of ideas. So much so that they even added BMX bikes to a Tony Hawk game. That doesn't even make sense. And most of the game is just a glorified tutorial. But notice how that classic mode still remained in the game. Now Project 8 is where the true evolution of Tony Hawk began and died. I'm not even going to touch on the revamped physics and animations. This is where free roaming made sense and actually rivaled the classic formula for the first time. We're back to having no story. We do have motivation, becoming a top 8 skater by completing challenges, but there is no real plot like before. Some missions do connect, but unless you pay attention, you won't notice. So admittedly, the one thing new that Underground introduced that was good was taken away, which is the story mode. But that doesn't have anything to do with making a great Tony Hawk Pro Skater game, because something far greater was made here. Remember that Tony Hawk lives and dies on his core gameplay and level design. Project 8 knocks these mechanics out of the park. This map was huge, but it was packed very tightly, meaning you can't go an inch without seeing something to do to progress the goal of being in the top 8. You still level up by skating about, but now you have spot challenges. In fairness, Underground 2 sorta did do this first, but not to this degree. Spray tags mark on-the-fly challenges that you could do at any time by just skating on them. These are short but fun activities that can be pretty hard if you go for the highest score, which is sick. You still have missions that require you to speak to someone, but the dialogue, just like 4, is skippable unless you just want to hear whatever context they made up for the skate challenge. Every mission has a sick difficulty, and a lot of the times you can't even beat these unless you've leveled up already. Because everything is so tight and skating as much as possible rewards you with stats, money, and if you do a spot challenge, it helps you progress your career, free roaming finally has been fleshed out. 5 games later. Classic mode is here, and this is the first time where classic mode feels like the lesser of the two. Then we have Tony Hawk's Proving Ground. It's the last game made by Neversoft, and it's not a bad game at all, but it suffers from what all the other Tony Hawk games did after 3. It was trying to do too much. We do have a story again, but not just one story. We have 3 stories. And as far as stories go in a Tony Hawk game, it's the worst. The story isn't that bad, like in a pocket, like by itself. If you just pay attention to Proving Ground, I'm sure people have loved this story. But if you just know about Underground story, Underground 2 story, yeah, in comparison, it's the worst out of the series. And what's even crazier is that the way this game functions, following the story actually can ruin your experience. At least in my case, it did. You see, Proving Ground's map blends multiple cities into one with no loading tunnels. The problem is the map is so big that getting to the next story mission could be so far away, and navigating this map isn't the easiest thing to do. And the game actually has a bad compass, so it's pretty hard to know where you're going or where you should be. The levels here are wide, and by doing this, they also mess up the convenient nature of the spot challenges. I really have to search for them this time when before I didn't. One of the core mechanics of a Tony Hawk game, for it to be great, they need to have a great map. And no, the map isn't bad, but again, it's too many different things conflating with this map. They want me to do spot challenges, but then they're spread too far apart and I don't know where they are. They want me to follow a story, but then the story mission's all the way across town, and everything just seems too spaced out, and it just seems like I'm searching for stuff more than I'm skating or doing anything. Then on top of that, this game actually brings classic mode alongside it, and because the map isn't really built around that, it doesn't feel that good. It actually ruins the 2-minute format because of the map. That's why it was important for me to explain to you what makes a great Tony Hawk game, because even though it's hard to explain, the map in Proving Ground isn't a bad map. It's just them wanting it to be so big and wide. It's almost like they try to make it too realistic. There's like these small areas where skating there is cool, but if you just want to skate around wherever you went like you could like basically in any other game, it doesn't feel that great. Now, it's one game I left out, that being Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5. You might be wondering, why am I even speaking about this game? But it's for a good reason. Now look, I'm about to say something that could be considered controversial. So you guys need to make sure that you're sitting down, because if you're standing up, you might hit the floor and I don't want to be liable. Tony Hawk Pro Skater 5 does one thing better than Tony Hawk Pro Skater 4. Tony Hawk Pro Skater 5 was supposed to have a seamless online career mode where you would be in a map like Pro Skater 4, skating around if you wanted to, and completing challenges alone or with a friend. Pro Skater 5 allowed the player to ignore the icons that start the missions and just let you do any mission you wanted via a menu, which is basically what you end up doing when you just beeline it to an NPC, skipping the dialogue and just doing the thing they ask you to do. You might be in shock that anyone would say anything about Pro Skater 5 is better than any other game in the series, but I feel if I had to choose between beelining it to a skater to do a mission versus just selecting the mission I want to do from a menu, I'll just select the mission from a menu because it is a easier thing to do than trying to hunt down these skaters across the map. And a side note, although Pro Skater 5 was hard garbage, I'm not denying that. Why does everybody hate the shell shaded design? I thought that was interesting. Maybe I'm just into anime games and that's why. But even if you don't hear me out with this one, you think Tony Hawk Pro Skater 5 is so hot garbage that you don't want to hear anyone say anything good about it, I'll name a game that I actually got for Christmas. The Pro Skater 4 that I got for Christmas was the PS1 version. And that game is better than Pro Skater 4 on PS2 in one particular area. For those that don't know, Tony Hawk Pro Skater 4 on the PS1 brought over the bigger maps and free roaming gameplay like its bigger brother. It removed the NPCs, however, and replaced them with icons that gave you a mission, and once you finished it, the game would just keep going. No slow clapping or loading. So in a way, the PS1 version handles this better than the PS2 version. I know that sounds crazy, but if you played the PS1 version and then the PS2 version, I think you might agree with me, at least in this department, that getting in and out of a mission was way faster. Whether you agree with me or not, I hope this history lesson was entertaining and informative for both old fans and newcomers. Let me be real with you guys for a minute. If they gave us like the normal Tony Hawk Pro Skater 4 career mode, I wouldn't be complaining about it. It wasn't that bad, but I just know that it wasn't that great either because I've been recently playing Tony Hawk Pro Skater 4. All the footage you see is new. This is an old footage. And the whole time I was just beelining it to the next mission. And I was saying to myself, oh, they're changing it with the 2-minute format. That actually might add some challenge to the game because being able to complete all the goals in 2 minutes was a challenge for most players. It was something that the hardcore wanted to do. Pro Skater 4 really didn't have that aspect because each mission had its own timer or some didn't have timers at all. If they change any other Tony Hawk game, and I'm talking about Thug and up to the 2-minute format, I would be pissed off and I'll be right there with you guys because those games had stories. They were designed nowhere near around the 2-minute format and it just wouldn't make sense to remake those and remove the story and the plot with them. Pro Skater 4 just didn't have a story. It essentially was the 2-minute format broken up and then gave you a free roam career mode, which again, you have free skate. If you want to free roam in the level, you could just play free skate. It was in every single game. It's still in Pro Skater 4. It's kind of redundant being in Pro Skater 4. I just don't see the point of people complaining. I get it. You want it because it was there before. But when you really think about it, was it that big of a deal? I made this video to share my opinion and to help out people that have no idea what any of us are complaining about. A friend of mine thought a story was lost by them changing the career mode because when people hear career mode, they might think a story is involved, but that's just not the case. And I didn't want anyone else to assume the same thing. Pro Skater 4 Remake may not have the free roam career, but if they give us good missions, I don't think we'll be disappointed. We don't know how the collection will work with New Game Plus. You know, maybe New Game Plus will add extra missions and goals because Pro Skater 4 actually had about 16 to 21 goals. So maybe New Game Plus will give us certain sections of goals and then another run will give you a different section of goals, or maybe different pro skaters have access to different goals. Who knows how they'll do it, but I think overall we'll be fine. And I don't think when the game releases, anyone's really going to be tripping about it anymore. Now, I do want to say this. I respect anyone that still doesn't like the change because you might just be one of the few people that really like being able to free roam in your career mode. And that's perfectly fine. I'm not tripping about that if that's what you're into. And if you want to fight the good fight, that's cool. But at the same time, I watch so many people stream Tony Hawk Pro Skater 4, whether it be casually, whether it be for speed running, this would make sense, but even casually. People are skipping these dialogues. They're just going straight to the NPCs. I just don't think it's a big deal. And I don't think we should be crashing out over this. But if we should be complaining about anything, we should be complaining about why Doom Guy, which was free in the PC version, now costs extra money. That's something that I think we all can agree with is bullcrap.